this happening? Is this happening? Did we just become best friends? Come on, let's see if this thing's live. I can never tell. I have to wait for the actual screen to pop on. Makes me very nervous. There it is. Here am I sitting in my tin can, far above the ground. Planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do. Dude, I was listening to Bowie in the car. Genius. Genius. How are you guys? Welcome to Friday. What is it? Like September 3rd. It's 4:20. It's 4:20 Pacific time. Can't plan this stuff. No, I did not smoke weed. Welcome to the show, guys. This is going live to everybody. I shared it on all the platforms, whatever. I just want to have fun and talk about anything you want to talk about. There's so much stuff happening and yet nothing. That's a story of the universe, right? All this perceived activity, but in reality, a still center that cannot be faded. So let's speak to each other from that still center while respecting the swirl of nonsense. Speaking of which, so what's up with Rogan? Looks like he's better, gotten better really quick, got COVID. I still don't know if he was vaccinated. Does anybody know the answer to that? I don't know that he's ever said, right? He just said, well, you know, if you're young, you don't necessarily need to be vaccinated. But I don't think he's ever said whether he got vaccinated. Correct me if I'm wrong. But one thing that did kind of, you know, enough so that I made a little short video on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, just kind of poking fun at the fact that there are a lot of people who are like, I don't want vaccines. I don't want that ish in me. That's a poison. And then they get COVID and they're like, okay, I took ivermectin and IV, you know, pubic hair and nougat and milk chocolate, all IV. And then I took monoclonal antibodies. Those are great, by the way, and NAD and vitamins. And it's like, okay, that's great. You're throwing the kitchen sink. You're throwing the kitchen sink at it. That's wonderful. Except, but you don't want, like, the one thing that we've actually studied in randomized controlled trials with tens of thousands of people that would reduce your risk of severe disease. It's a tough cognitive dissonance to deal with. What up, K Dizzy 21 says, Z-Dog, what are your thoughts on insanity that's going on in Australia? Do you believe continuous mandates lead to that? Or is that just a one-off case of tyranny? That's a loaded question. It's like the way you framed it. It's kind of like, we know where you're coming from, man, or girl. Look, here's my instinct on this. And again, you can take this or leave this. It's just one dude's thoughts. You are going to have a hard time beating a natural pandemic without a tool other than shutting everything down, because people get tired of it. You cause ancillary damage in the form of jobs, sanity, the travel industry. I mean, schools, it becomes untenable. It was clear in the beginning, at least I kept saying it. I've been wrong about a lot of stuff, but I might not have been wrong about this, which is this thing's not going to go away. You bend the curve. All you're doing is smearing it out so you don't overwhelm your hospitals. But in the absence of an effective vaccine, it's not going away. Well, okay, now there's an effective vaccine. So if Australia could spin up vaccination fast, we know that even with about 80% vaccination, like somewhere like maybe Great Britain's gotten or Israel's gotten, close to that, it's still not quite enough to prevent all deaths and hospitalizations, but it really does put a dent in severe disease. Well, that's probably enough. If you actually target protection, you go, well, okay, it's elderly people, people with chronic disease that are at the highest risk. They should continue to wear masks and be cautious and make sure they're vaccinated and so on. We could talk about booster and all that, third dose and all that. But that's really all you need. So the question is, what should Australia do? Well, they should vaccinate as many people as they can and do endless mandates and shutdowns and all that. Are they going to ultimately save a butt ton of lives versus the cost in the long run? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I can tell you my instinct is probably not much. You know, that's my instinct, but my instincts are wrong too, a lot. And you know, my bias is a little bit like, hey, freedom. So there's that. But I tell you, I love the vaccines. Without them, this conversation would be very different, especially in the setting of Delta, because at that point it would be like, well, okay, let's hide out for a bit, because if you're vulnerable, especially, Delta hasn't really. People talk about the, oh, you know, more hospitalizations and so on from Delta, say, than from Alpha or whatever, and it may be because there's more viral load, right? But in general, it's not like we've really changed the demographics a lot beyond we've protected the elderly by vaccinating them first in many cases, and so the infections you're going to see are going to be in younger people just because they're the only targets left for a virus that will infect everyone. And in fact, will likely reinfect people ultimately who've been vaccinated, because the thing will eventually go, like we were saying before, if you're smearing out the curve, it's eventually going to become endemic like a common cold. It never goes away because you just can't eliminate this coronavirus. It's not the nature of how it is. You don't get sterilizing immunity either from natural infection or from vaccination. Now, speaking of natural infection, I did a video on that recently, and it's kind of interesting because, and by the way, Earth 2 Nick, we can talk about those FDA regulators stepping down. They're stepping down, presumably, according to my friend Vinay Prasad, presumably due to the way that these boosters are being promoted by the administration for, you know, everybody. And it's like, well, wait, first of all, you're kind of sidestepping CDC and all that. Second of all, it's kind of like, or FDA, right? You're sidestepping FDA. And second of all, it's like, wait, we better make sure that before you give a carte blanche to a population to get a third shot, that it actually does what you want it to do, which is prevent severe disease and death and hospitalization, or even reduce the spread of infection a lot. And all they're doing is going, well, it makes more antibodies. Well, okay. For elders, for people with immune compromise, where we're seeing breakthrough actually cause severe disease, yeah, sure. That's great. But for everybody else, boy, you better show us good evidence that that's actually doing something that works. And the presumption is that those FDA regulators stepped down because they couldn't be a part of that kind of, you know, non-scientific behavior. Anyway, so the natural immunity thing, here, let me scroll down here. By the way, just saying natural immunity, I posted in my video on Instagram, hashtag natural immunity. The hashtag has been canceled by Instagram. You can't use that hashtag. If you click it, it says this hashtag is not valid due to misinformation. So okay, let me just let you know what that means. You can't talk about natural COVID immunity with a hashtag that says hashtag natural immunity without being labeled misinformation. So the piece I did, which said, yeah, natural immunity is quite powerful, which, by the way, if you guys recall, when I do videos, I'm like, yeah, you need to get vaccinated unless you've been infected with COVID, in which case maybe get one shot or maybe get two. It's probably better, but you don't have to. Don't panic about it. Been saying that forever. And people are like, oh, finally, Z-Dog, you're opening your mouth and saying that natural immunity is a thing. It's like, bitch, I've been saying that from early on. How can you have a vaccine that's effective if natural infection doesn't cause immunity? Paul Offit and I have said this over multiple episodes. Now, early on, it was felt based on some data that came out actually that antibody levels are higher after 2 doses of the mRNA vaccines than they are after natural infection, neutralizing antibody levels that you can measure. Okay, that may be true. But does it correlate to protection against infection and severe disease? Well, it turns out in the Israeli data, which is preprint, which had a large trial, but a small number of actual sick patients, because guess what? Both natural immunity and vaccinated immunity work. So there were not that many people to study that were sick. Hello? Ah, man, I love it when anti-vaxxers are like, but Israel. It's like, yeah, but Israel. Exactly. The shit works. So back to this thing. That Israeli data said, hey, look, actually, natural immunity prevented more hospitalization and more reinfection than vaccine by several fold, right? So there's something about natural immunity, whether it's multiple antibodies that you make, whether it's some T-cell response that's more robust from being exposed to a live virus, whatever it is, right? There you go. So the thing is, you can't talk about that. And so I've said, and I tell people who email me, by the way, if you email me, look, just do me a favor. I get 600 emails now a day, right? Through my website, 600. And everybody wants to tell me their life story. Here's a little bit about me and the 13 things that make me unique in the question I'm about to ask. I love it. I love that people are so open and they want to share and they trust me enough to do that. I try to respond to all the emails, but boy, it's now getting impossible because of this. Too much text. I'll tell you, I've seen every single pattern that you could explain to me that you have. I've not seen anything that's unique now because I've seen it all. So what you can do if you email me, just bullet out your questions. Here's who I am, one line, here's the questions, and I'll try my best to answer, because what I find is I can be very nuanced with people, right? Like, here's the thing. Oh, this is what you've heard. Well, this is the truth. With you, you know what? Don't rush out and get the vaccine. Or yeah, you're the person I worry about. You need to get vaccinated. And it's usually people who've recently been COVID infected, or they've been COVID infected. They're like, they're pressuring me to get the vaccine. And I tell them what I said in the video, which is this: you're probably okay against severe disease. Now, sure, you could fail that. So could vaccinated people. But if you just got one dose of one of the mRNA vaccines, the data in that same trial says you're even half as likely as a naturally infected person to get reinfected and sick. So it's probably, if you're worried, if you're high risk, get one dose of the mRNA vaccines. Now, a lot of people have said, well, but I'm worried that I'm going to get terrible symptoms because I was naturally infected. That sucked. And then you're going to re-challenge me with the same antigen. They're not saying this. This is how I'm interpreting it. And I'm going to feel like crap. And the answer is, yeah, it's possible. It sucks, right? So that's why people are a little reluctant. And so but the question is then, how high risk are you? If you're willing to suck it up for some symptoms, take some Tylenol, take a day off work, which some people can't do. You may have nothing happen, right? You may have no experience like that. A lot of people don't. Then you're going to get super immunity, like Emperor shooting dark force lightning out of his fingers immunity, right? Antibody resistance, Brutal Peggy, haven't really seen it at high rates yet. They're talking about in vitro. Maybe there's some resistance, but in practice, we don't yet see it. It's mostly been a South American thing, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now, speaking of this, so you can imagine, like it really kills me because people email me all the time and they say, I've been so frustrated that I'm pressured by mandates by employers to get a vaccine that I feel I'm already immune because I got infected. And there's two ways to look at this. I'll tell you how I look at it at the end of this, all right? Way one is, okay, but we can't test for your immunity easily because the antibodies we don't know how to correlate them to actual disease resistance. The logistics, as Paul Offit said, that's why they said everybody gets just vaccinated. And you can see me shaking my head because it's like, so we're going to let logistics stop us from doing this thing. The logistics make it hard to go, okay, you've been infected, you've been vaccinated, et cetera. It's not impossible. You can do it. There's ways to show. Okay, maybe you do an antibody test. Maybe you do proof of PCR test. Maybe you do a hospital admission. You go, look, I was admitted. Whatever it is, there's ways to skin this. These aren't insolvable problems, right? They'll say it's too hard, and getting another dose, getting 2 doses is what they recommend, right? That's the formal recommendation. Will give you better immunity. So just shut up and do it. And yeah, we're going to mandate it because, public health. All right. Then the second way to deal with this is to go, hey, that's dumb. Okay, it's not science, it's public health. They're not always the same. Have you noticed that? So public health, and I tell you this because I'm a little frustrated because since I put out the natural immunity video, some docs on Twitter are like, this is dangerous. This is dangerous what you're saying, because people are going to misunderstand it, and they're going to think that, first of all, their natural infection protects them, and second of all, they're going to go out and get naturally infected instead of getting the vaccine. And I'm like, okay, did you not look at the data? The natural infection does protect them. Oh, but we don't want them to get the wrong idea. Shut up! It makes me so upset, you guys, like when public health people behave this way. We need to keep the message straight. Okay, let me tell you what your message is doing. Let me tell you what your message is doing, because I fucking see it. You don't see it because you're in some, I'm sure you're getting death threats and all that. It's really hard to be a public health official. I need to pump the brakes on my anger for a second. They have a very hard job. They're doing the best they can, but some of them are just absolutely fucking blind. And I'll tell you why, because they are not seeing, because first of all, I think these folks wouldn't even reach out to them because they feel so shamed and humiliated talking to these people who think they're better than them and who don't tell them the truth. So wait, so you're implying that I shouldn't tell the truth, that natural immunity actually can be very robust at preventing disease. And then in the same video, I said, hey, don't go out and do a chickenpox party with COVID, because The problem with that, the downside of natural immunity is death, long COVID, disability, blood clots, brain bleeds, all the things that other Israeli studies have shown actually COVID does that vaccines don't do. Vaccines maybe do myocarditis. Maybe they even do appendicitis in certain vulnerable people, all treatable stuff, right? The J&J may do rare blood clots in particular risk populations. Okay, what does COVID do? Like 13x, 18x the risk of myocarditis, blood clots, bleeding, neurologic problems, ICU, post-ICU disease, delirium, brain fog, all the other stuff, long COVID. Come on, dudes. Like, you don't go out and just go out to get naturally infected with COVID. That's not a smart thing to do. And I'm trying to tell you, I'm not trying to shame you. I'm saying that's not an answer, right? But what the public health people say is don't tell them this. This is dangerous, what you're saying. That's why Instagram cancels the hashtag natural immunity. This is dangerous because people are going to misunderstand, and you have to understand people are stupid and we're smart. And if you tell them it this way, they'll just do what you need them to do. If you just mandate 2 shots for everybody, that's just going to be cleaner and simpler. All right, great. Until you talk to people and they go, okay, first of all, these people are lying to me. I can tell already because I can read the paper too. There are other people who read the paper and told me, yeah, that's just not true. I have concerns about the side effects, meaning the short-term symptoms of vaccine. I don't like it. I don't like needles. I don't like vaccine. If I don't have to take it to save my life or others, why should I do it? Just to fulfill your bureaucratic algorithm. This is a valid concern, you guys. Like, these are not selfish, evil people having this concern. These are rational, emotional actors. And notice the paradox. Rational, emotional. That's how humans behave. So when public health officials say, oh, just paint it with one brush because that's just going to save the most lives, area under the curve, they're not seeing what's actually happening, which is people are then going, I don't trust public health. That means probably masks are wrong. Any mandate, I don't want any of that. I've had my freedoms taken away already, and now they want to do more. It's all been politically divided. So now I don't, there's the politics component of it. So what are the emails I get? The emails I get are from people almost exclusively, actually, this is the vast majority of the 600 emails a day I get, that say something to the effect of, I was really bummed that nobody listened to the fact that I had bad COVID and now they want me to get a shot or I lose my job. Or I'm early in pregnancy and I'm just nervous about putting stuff in my body and I would just love, and I had COVID and they want me to get it. Or what do I do about pregnancy? I mean, the answer is the data shows that there's no increased risk in pregnancy, right? So I tell them, I go, yeah, okay, I totally get your concern. I understand that. But if you were my loved one, I would really want you to be vaccinated because the risk of being pregnant and getting COVID is much higher than any risk of vaccine, right? But all that being said, most of them are saying, I feel totally affronted and left behind by these officials that are painting everything with a brush, and I don't feel they're being honest with me. And then you go on Twitter and you see what they're telling me, and it's like, no, they aren't being honest with you. They are not being honest with you. They don't want me to be honest with you because they think it's going to cause harm. When has honesty really caused harm? Why can't we level? If we leveled with people from the beginning, if everybody was open and honest, do you think we'd even be in the mess we are now? Politicians are going to politicize stuff. That's just what they do. But let's just say we were all open and honest. What would have happened? A lot more people would be alive today. There'd be less division. If we were honest compassionately, come on. What's the scope on Novavax? Bien vidol. Nobody knows. I've talked to experts. They don't know when it's coming. So I don't know. It'd be nice to have it, right? Different process. It's a protein. It's a purified protein that's made in moth cells that are infected with a baculovirus that tells the moth cells to make the spike protein antigen. Then that stuff's purified, and then they add an adjuvant that comes from a soap bark tree, I believe. It's a adjuvant is something that stimulates the immune system so that you get a stronger response to the antigen, and seems quite effective in the preliminary data. And it's a different technology. So if you don't like mRNA technology for some reason, you can go to that. Or if you're allergic to pegylated compounds in the nanoparticle of the mRNA vaccines. Thank you for all the super chats, you guys. Let me go back and read one of them. Lisette. Hey Z, I'm loving your TikToks and YouTube shorts. Keep it rolling. Yeah, I just started doing the YouTube Shorts and TikTok. I was very resistant to that because it's just childish crap. But then I realized, no, it's actually short form education, and you can throw some comedy in, right? So why not, right? And we take some of our old videos, we repurpose them, and then sometimes I'll just do a quick rant for a minute. So I'll keep doing those, but you can check us out on TikTok. I don't care if you follow me on TikTok. TikTok's garbage. It's more that I just want to reach as many people as I can with whatever message, right? Joe Miami says, former anti-vaxxer here, still against vaccine mandates or passports. I'm with you. Want you to know that thanks to your rational talk and anti-divisional views, my wife and I are now fully vaxxed. Man, I don't know, man. That just makes me really happy. And it makes me happy because of who you are, right? It makes me happy because you're somebody who is in that group I just described. That's like, why don't people just tell me the truth, right? How can I trust something when I'm lied to all the time, or I have the perception of being lied to, and no one listens to me? No one takes my concerns seriously. And look, I used to be the guy that would be the first to shame somebody for those views because I was firmly in tribe A and I didn't have enough self-insight or growth. It took me a long time and a lot of like work and a lot of, it's hard to do, to overcome our tribal instincts, to go in-group, out-group. Like, oh, my group of scientists says this. And you get all this validation from your own group and all this hate from the other group. But the hate from the other group you're fine with because it's energizing, because it rallies your own people. It's really anti-productive, but it's how we kind of evolved, man. Thanks, Joe. So I get a lot of emails like this. They're like, or they say, oh, you convinced me and I was not for it. Or you know what, I'm still not getting the vaccine, but I'm telling other people that, hey, for them, it may be a good choice because of what I saw on your show. So that's great. And the truth is, I'm not so invested in you getting vaccinated if you're like, if I look at your email and I'm like, you know what, you're pretty low risk. But I do want to give you the information and cut through some of the jazz you see online, because a lot of it is, not good. The thin line begins to blur. Who super chatted me, says, hey, are morbidly obese people eligible or recommended for the third shot booster, especially since they're high risk? So that's a group that I feel like, yeah, they should be. But again, I haven't seen the data on it. And right now it's just immunocompromised. What I think is that, this is my intuition on this, is that the third dose really would be beneficial for people at high risk and people with bad immune systems. So elderly people, people with immunocompromised, people on immune-compromised meds, those kind of things, probably good for a third dose. Everybody else, I'm just not sure yet. I'd have to see data that says that immunity against severe disease and hospitalization is waning in someone like me before I would run out and get a booster. Although I'll say this, I might just get the booster just to tell you guys what the symptoms are like, right? Go, okay, so I had the second dose I got, Moderna, I had these like, oh, it was man flu for like a day, right? What would a third do? Go get it live for you guys and then come back and just report and be like, this is what it's like for me, So because I know they're safe, right? So I would be willing to do that even if I didn't think it was going to make a big difference in my health personally. It'd be good for teaching. And I think we're kind of drowning in vaccine here in the US. What I'd love is to wave a magic wand and just send all the boosters to the developing world where the variants are emerging. Where did Mu come from? South America. Where did Delta come from? India. Where did Alpha come from? The UK, but I don't know if it originated, they speculate, in an immunocompromised patient in the UK who was getting a lot of treatment and just breeding virus. That was a theory. We don't really know. And I don't even know if it really originated in the UK. You guys will have to fact check me on that because I haven't looked at that in a while. You had a South African variant, you know what I mean? Brazilian variant. You got to go where the thing is replicating a lot. It replicates here, but, there's just more people in the rest of the world. Where are we at? How long after the second dose would you get the third? I mean, I think they're saying like 8 months. I think 6 months. Here's speculation that I think is maybe on point, which is this. If there was one thing that was rushed, this is going to be loaded. If there's one thing that was rushed in the vaccine development process, it might have been the spacing interval for when you give a second dose for the mRNA vaccines. Now, what do I mean by rushed? Remember, the trials themselves were not rushed in the sense that they were able, because during a pandemic, you have a lot of patients. They were able to recruit very quickly, cut through the red tape that normally slows everything down, get the funding very quickly because government said, hey, we'll pay whether or not the thing works. We'll buy your vaccine. So took all the risk away. They did the same process you would have done for normal vaccine, but they were able to do it much, 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 much faster because they're, first of all, building on work that's been done over a decade. But then taking the red tape away and then having all this situational line where you got plenty of patients willing to sign up for the trial and enough circulating disease during a surge that you could actually get good data without needing 1 million people in the trial, right? But the thing that might have been rushed is, well, how do you figure out the dosing regimen? Well, you can dose it in animals, right? Give it so many days apart. But remember, while you're figuring out those dosing regimens, the clock on the pandemic is ticking. So you're doing this during a pandemic. So are you going to go, okay, well, let's see, after 3 weeks, it looks pretty freaking good. Let's go with that. Or are you going to go, you know what, let's wait another 6 months and redose it and try that. Now, you can do those in parallel, but they said, okay, this looks pretty good. Let's go with this because we're in an emergency here, right? And so they put them kind of close together, 3 weeks, and Moderna 4 weeks. So now what we may be thinking is, well, maybe that's not long enough apart. Maybe it should have been 3 months or 6 months to begin with, you know? And, like HPV vaccine is, I forget how many months it is, 2 months, a month, I forget. Oh boy, I got to look this up. Man, I'm kind of dumb today. It's been a long day. You guys can fill me in the comments. But the idea that maybe we squanch them together, it's a possibility, right? So it might not be so much that we're giving a booster, but that we're giving the second dose. You know what I mean? Brian Burns says, got the Moderna today because of you, Z-Dog. Man, you guys know how to make me really kind of unstably emotional. Opin. Thoughts on the new, and by the way, the anti-vaxxers are probably thinking, oh, he's emotional because he's getting paid by pharma. Every time someone says they got the vaccine, he gets a check. God, if only. If only you could do good in the world and do well financially, and they were aligned. Wouldn't that be great? Sometimes it happens, not usually. I talked a little bit about the Mu COVID variant. We don't know what that thing's about, honestly, yet. It's too early. In test tubes, there's some antibody resistance, but what does that mean in life? We don't know, because remember, it's got to infect people, get through antibodies, got to get through T cell defenses, got to get through your innate immunity. And so that's what we need to see. What's interesting is it has not yet usurped Delta, not even close. It's still like, a very small fraction, but in South America, Colombia, et cetera, it's like 30, 40, 50% of the infections there. So it's something you have to watch. It's like I say, it's a variant of concern, as they say. Joe Miami says, hey, your thoughts on nurses having to quit their jobs over the stance of not wanting the vaccine. How can we treat them like that? They were in the trenches during the worst, and this is how we repay. Joe Miami. Okay. This is going to get sensitive, all right? But I'm going to be as honest with you as I can be. Nurses have been pummeled during this pandemic, like just destroyed, because they're the ones every day right there risking their lives. Docs do it, but not to the degree nurses do it. Nurses are there at the bedside, proning the patient, cleaning the bed. The CNAs, all of them, frontline, respiratory therapists, they're right there. Okay? And when staffing gets bad, when surges happen, the ICUs fill up, everything, they're the ones having to bear the brunt of that, and hence some of them are quitting. We have understaffing. Understaffing was bad already because the system runs at just barely enough staffing because money, that when a surge happens, we're not designed for it. Look what's happening in Oregon. Oregon's hospitals are filling up, not because they don't have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country, because they do. They have a very high vaccination rate. And it's still mostly unvaccinated people showing up in their ICUs. It's that they don't have enough beds to begin with. They have the fewest per capita, I think, beds in the country per capita. So when you get a surge from a pandemic, they're not set up for that. They're set up for efficiency and cost savings and focusing on prevention in the beginning. But when something like this happens, it just destroys. If you're not flexible, it's very hard then quickly to staff up and manage that, right? They're doing the best they can, but it is hard. So nurses have been crapped on, right? They've been put in harm's way it's really, really hard. Now, some of them have gotten COVID, usually from the community, not as much from hospitals, because those masks, N95s work. And this kind of universal precautions that they have in the hospital. But you end up with COVID, and then you're told by your employer later that, hey, there's this vaccine, and we're going to mandate it or you're going to lose your job. You can't work here if you don't get the vaccine. Now, 96% of physicians, according to an AMA survey, are vaccinated. Less than 50% of nurses are, at least as of July. So what's going on, right? Shouldn't a mandate not be a problem? Because most healthcare workers would just be like, yeah, of course. I mean, we see COVID every day. We see people die of it. Like, I'm going to get a vaccine. So what's going on? So this is where I've talked to a lot of nurses. I've talked to nurses who are very hesitant about vaccine. This is what I hear. And it's not a one size fits all. And you guys can fill me in if you're a nurse. One is, hey, I had COVID. I don't want to get a shot and be out for 2 days with man flu. Next, I don't trust this new technology. I don't know enough about it. And here's a secret that people need to know. It's not a secret. Nurses see when doctors overorder tests, do unnecessary procedures because they're incentivized to do it in a fee-for-service mill. They're good people incentivized by a bad system. They see it. They're the ones who have to carry out that unnecessary, lactulose enema or the blood draw in the middle of the night or, serial, duo nebs with RT that's not proven to help. But either the doctor's trying to cover their butt or patient expectations are such or patient satisfaction scores are going to wreck them or they've just been conditioned to do this or worse, they're getting paid to do it because sometimes that happens. Not so much with vaccines, people. So just get that off your mind. But with a lot of other procedures, hell yeah. So nurses see this and they go, well, wait, now these guys are telling us to go and do this other thing that I feel like could harm me and doesn't have benefit. Now, if they think it doesn't have benefit and they haven't had COVID, then they're, wow. But some people do believe that. Now, the third thing, so they're suspicious, understandably. The third thing is, and by the way, a lot of people are falling in this camp. This is not irrational behavior. It's, again, emotional and rational behavior based on what your skill set and your knowledge base, your life history, your causes and conditions, and where you're coming from, your experience. So the third thing is you got to understand that physicians are overtrained in certain things, undertrained in others like emotional intelligence, connection, bedside manner, overtrained in a lot of looking at being able to sift through information and misinformation in medicine. So, for example, doctors can look at one of these, these occasional clowns that pop up that go like, oh, ivermectin is a miracle drug that cures everybody. Okay. A lot of doctors would look at that and go, anytime someone says that, your spider sense tingles. You look at the prime data, oh, this is observational data. Oh, this randomized control trial got retracted for plagiarism and fraud. This thing, okay, yeah, no. Or, oh, I'm worried about, infertility. Oh, let me look into that. No, that's not a thing. Okay, what about long-term effects? Let's look at that. Okay, well, every single other vaccine, any effects that happened within the first 2 months of getting the vaccine. There's never been a vaccine that we've had that's had effects show up longer than that haven't been described in the first 2 months. Okay, good. So I'm comfortable with that. 96% of doctors. Nurses haven't had, most of them, not all. Some have very advanced degrees, nurse practitioners, others have advanced degrees, but others don't. And so what they do is they work on a combination of their existing medical knowledge, their suspicion of leadership and the system and unnecessary stuff, and their own intuition. And I think that's why less than 50% of nurses, or whatever the number is now, are vaccinated. It's not because the vaccines don't work. It's because we have human beings with human, the whole system is flawed, right? And this is what emerges. So vaccine mandates. A way to solve this problem is you mandate it, right? You say, well, okay, then every nurse has to get it or get out. Well, how is that really getting at the root of their suspicion and resistance? No. It's saying, oh, I hear you're crazy and stupid. We're just going to make you do this thing that every instinct in you is telling you not to do. And now that we're telling you to do it, it's even worse. So how's that going to work? It's going to generate people leaving. They're going to hospitals that don't have the mandates. They're going online and becoming militantly anti-vaccine. I've seen this. Good people that are reasonably trained becoming militantly anti-vaccine because you've driven them into the arms of people who will believe what they feel about this, understandably feel about this. And these are the same people who will tell me, don't do a video on natural immunity because you're going to kill people. Okay? Does that make sense? I don't know. It doesn't even make sense to me sometimes. I just ramble. Love for BJA says, Dr. Z, I'm torn on the need for a vaccine. I'm considering J&J because I don't trust mRNA technology. Is it a safe and effective option? Thanks for being reasonable and understanding. So, okay, I understand your innate distrust of the mRNA technology. I would say that the more you learn about it, the more you're like, okay, I want that one. That's what I'll say. It's one of those situations where like I really dug into this. Like, now about the J&J, I think it's a great vaccine. What it does, it may generate even more of a kind of a T cell response because it's got live virus in it that doesn't replicate as the vector. But it's still injecting genetic code into your cells in the form of DNA via a virus. So the technology is really not dramatically different in that way. It's just what's the vector. Now you may say, well, I don't like that lipid nanoparticle on the in the mRNA vaccines. Okay, so you're okay with a virus though, right? It's a human adenovirus. So humans get infected with this virus. They don't die over it usually. But I think, you know, that's kind of how I think about it. Now, the single J&J, probably less effective against reinfection, but probably pretty good against severe disease. So if that's your choice, man, I support it wholeheartedly. I really do. So, you know, we don't know what's happening with second dose for J&J. That data is still forthcoming. Jaime says, I received Moderna dose 8 months apart. Very little side effects, sore arm and fatigue for a few days. It's been 1 week from the second dose. Oh, 8 months apart. Interesting. So you did this like trial of one where you're like, I got a dose and I'm going to wait 8 months. Yeah. So let us know how you do. It sounds like you're doing okay. That's good. We'll see if it's, you know, and I don't know if is that too far apart? We don't know because I don't think it's been studied directly where you just give one dose and then the priming dose and then the sort of second dose later. Let's see where we're at. I'm kind of preferentially reading the super chat here because you guys go out of your way to donate to support the show, and it gets my attention here. So many people suffer terrible injuries after getting vaccinated. I know several formerly healthy people who will now require lifelong treatment. Doesn't it sound like a crime to mandate something like this without any legal recourse later? R. Katie Itkin. Okay, so this is a lot. Let's get into this. And I got to take a drink for this one. It's just water, but I wish it was vodka. This is a very common question because people hear stories like, I got the vaccine, then this happened. A healthy person got the vaccine, then this happened. Now, there's many ways to look at this, and we need to really nuance this because you have a lot of pieces to this question that we should talk about. Okay, so the first piece is this. Are these things that are happening, neurologic problems, seizures, you know, there's a million things people list out that happen, right? Something that you might think is benign, but is very bothersome, like irregular menstrual cycle, things like that, associated with vaccine. Okay, so what could be happening? In a population of people where all eyes are on now because we're doing something new, we're vaccinating with an mRNA vaccine. It's new and old at the same time, right? Vaccines are age old, this particular technology new. All eyes are on this. And so you get the vaccine. First of all, people are intensely aware they're getting a vaccine. So all the attention's on it. Did I ever tell you guys? Like, I may not have. Maybe I did. So when I got my first dose of Moderna back in January, I streamed it. Like I did video and I streamed it. Actually, I didn't stream it live. I recorded the video and then posted it up. I remember walking to the car with my kids with me after the 15-minute sort of period and feeling a little panicked, like being like, oh man, like, I hope I'm not one of those like people that's getting delayed anaphylaxis, which doesn't really happen with this, but I'm really worried, right? I sat in the car for a bit before I did anything because I'm like, I don't want to crash the car with these kids. That's how powerful the mind-body connection is. Like here I am, like I'd looked at the data enough that I was convinced this is the thing to do. And I still like nearly had a panic attack. And that's me. What's going to happen to a lot of people where the mind-body connection is so strong, and whether you have neurologic symptoms or symptoms like that, how much of that is a neurologic symptom that has a physical cause, and how much of that is this continuum, body-mind, that we are? Okay, so that's one piece, right? But it's just one little piece. The second piece is, since the eyes are on this, in a population, this stuff is going to happen to people anyways. Now you throw a vaccine and put all the cameras on it. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to associate this with this, even though there's no causation. It's pure correlation. Now, but the thing is, you can look at this. So you have the VAERS data. You have epidemiologic tools to actually look at this data and go, okay, well, is this different than what you would expect in the population at the same time? Is there any reason for this? And when you look at that, it has yet to pan out that any of this stuff is actually causally associated with the vaccine, except for the things that are. Myocarditis, which is rare. So you're actually catching things that are pretty rare, right? Because by your question, you're saying, I know several formerly healthy people who now require lifelong treatment. So this is like a huge incidence rate, right? Well, how is it that we catch something that's so rare, like 1 in 40,000 myocarditis, 1 in 120,000 something for the blood clot thing with J&J and AstraZeneca, but we can't catch that? Well, we're using the same tools to look at it. It ought to be a very strong signal, but it's not bigger than the background signal. So this is very, very important. So when we talk about these kind of things, now, so that's the second possibility, right? The third possibility is there's some stuff with the vaccine that has to do with like an individual bad batch, which like they thought in Japan, right? But now they're even looking at that and going, well, no, it doesn't look like it actually was causing harm. But again, more data we need to look at that. So maybe there was a bad batch. Maybe there's something mysterious in the vaccine that we're not catching, but man, every eye in the world is on this vaccine, you know? And so that would be really unlikely, not impossible, but really unlikely. So my money is on number 2 and a little bit of number 1. And if number 3 is correct, it's like there was a bad batch or something that went wrong, or intentional problems with the vaccine. You know, shit happens. Again, I would be shocked though. But you never know. Now, the third piece is this legal recourse. I forget the agents. It's not the vaccine court, I think, that's doing COVID. I have to look into exactly what the recourse is, but you still have recourse if something happens, and they can, you can associate it with vaccine, I believe. But again, I'm not a lawyer. We got to talk to a lawyer about that. Now, your point about mandates, I hate mandates. So I'm not going to disagree that I think we shouldn't be having to mandate, right? But again, if you want to save the most lives possible, you mandate it. That's why the public health people do it. I'm not sure. Honestly, I really have to introspect about this one. Like how important, like there are fates worse than death sometimes. And so I really have to introspect on how I feel about this before I open my mouth. So thank you, by the way, thank you for challenging us with your question and also for the support. Arvin, thanks for the super chat. Arcady says, how do you feel about San Francisco vaccine mandate for indoor dining, bars, and other venues? Arcady. Okay, this is what I think, because this is my place. I don't live in San Francisco. I live in the South Bay, or in the peninsula. We don't have that mandate here, but I saw that in San Francisco. It makes me less, I don't go to San Francisco anyways, because it is a horrible, horrible place. I just hate it. Like it's gone so downhill in the last few years. Like you can't walk. My wife got spit on in the face by a homeless woman with mental illness in San Francisco as we were walking down the street. She came up to her face and spit in her face and then called her a racial slur. My wife is Chinese. This was an African-American homeless woman. And of course you can't blame her. She's mentally ill. She's homeless, right? But why would we want to put our kids in that environment? Whatever governance is happening in San Francisco, they're not taking care of these folks, right? Whatever liberal ethos they have, which is very laudable, it's not working for these folks. So with the vaccine mandate, they're saying, okay, we value these things, and you have to show a vaccine passport to eat inside. Now, remember, San Francisco gets cold outside, even in the summer. But, it's tolerable. So you make your decision. Do you want that? I think that San Francisco has every right to do that as a city. Its population would probably mostly agree. That's the culture there. And so let them do that. I have the right to say, I will not patronize a city that does that because I don't think it's a great idea. I think people should be treated as grown-ups, and I shouldn't have to show anyone my papers, but that's my bias, right? So I don't like it. I also think, I got to say this is important. It's discriminatory. So a city with such liberal ideals as San Francisco, which by the way, I laud that. We need a place like San Francisco to push things so far that the rest of the country goes, what? What? And then in 10 years, the rest of the country is like, oh, that's kind of normal. It's not a big deal, right? That's okay. We need to push things forward, even if they look insane now. Some of it is insane. You dial it back to a part that's sane, but at least it pushes things forward. Gay rights, gay marriage, those kind of things, wonderful, beautiful. So we need a San Francisco, at least one, probably just one. And it has a special place in my heart. It's where I did medical school. I fell in love with the city. You know, I grew up in rural part of California, and moving to San Francisco was like, wow. But when I was done with medical school, I swore I'd never go back there. And I haven't, to do anything beyond an occasional visit with people. So it's discriminatory because who are the likely people, the least likely people to be vaccinated? It's actually not who you think. It's not like some conservative QAnon person, although they're in the group, but it's Hispanics and African Americans and minorities, non-Asian minorities that are suspicious, right? With good cause, if you look at the medical history of race in America. So you're saying you can't come in my restaurant. How is that different than sending Rosa Parks to the back of the bus? Right? This is the blunt instrument of that public health wields. And you know, they'll say, well, look at our numbers. They're great, right? Like, okay, but at what cost? So there are some fates worse than death. It just depends. Again, your values may be different. And that's what's important. That's why we have politics. Politics are the way of hashing out values. Science is one thing, politics is another. Seems like they've merged in an unhealthy way. Ben says, hey, doctor, I've heard the COVID vaccine can cause blood vessels to become spiky and cut blood cells over time. Is this true? Nope. Nope. Just not true. So anything you see like that, often you'll see, okay, first of all, who's saying it? Where are they coming from? Do they represent any major organization? Okay, fine. If they don't, that's cool. Are they right? Then you look at what they're saying. Oh, it's some study in mice where they did this thing. They injected like super normal versions of spike protein or vaccine, and they found this happen in mice. It's like, okay, then I have a study with 190 million doses in humans. And we have seen none of that out of the proportion of what would happen in the background anyways, right? So that's my answer. Scroll back here. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. Nikki Brister. How can nursing facility staff with a federal vax mandate for all staff, or they pull Medicare and Medicaid dollars, and our staff will just go to hospitals or home health? I'm an LNFA. Yeah, I know. It's hard. I don't know what really the answer is, because it's the nursing home staff that are the least vaccinated and the most in danger and the most dangerous to their patients. They also tend to have lower levels. Remember, I was saying, the more training you have, the more likely you are to actually get vaccinated. And, anti-vax people, again, they'll come back and say, well, that's because they're more conditioned by the system. They're more in Big Pharma's pocket. They're more brainwashed. Okay, well, you can believe what you want. By the way, I got to say this. When you see anti-vax doctors talking, or these guys saying, oh, the spike protein rips up cells, whatever it is, watch carefully to see if they give the mainstream argument its due. Like if they say, oh, well, they'll say this and this and this and this and this, and clearly articulate without straw manning or doing other logical fallacies what the argument is. They never do that. Okay? That's a sign of misinformation. When you look at good information proposed correctly, they'll take an argument like that and go, okay, let's explain what these guys are saying in depth and where there's valid points and where it's cuckoo crazy, right? That's what you want to look for, really. Saint-Pierre, M. Saint-Pierre says, what do you think should happen post-pandemic in regards of academic education? I hope basic education will require more in-depth biology education and be mandatory to have a diploma. Man, that would be great. Better education. But you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. You know what I'd prefer? Forget science. Science is garbage. This is what I want people to learn. Critical thinking. How to recognize their own biases. How to connect better with their emotional responses and recognize their emotional responses. How to react responsibly instead of reactively. How to recognize misinformation. How to be less divisive on social media and in the world. How to have productive conversations with other humans. If we had a class on that was required for graduation, that would be vastly more effective than just brainwashing a bunch of people with, here's how the ribosome works. It's like, they're not going to remember that 10 years later, right? They might. But if you give them tools like how to critically think, how to recognize bias, how to recognize logical fallacies, these kind of things, they'll probably do a lot better. Recognize emotion, recognize that we're emotional creatures and how we can be manipulated by that. Sometimes it's ourselves manipulating ourselves. Let's scroll it down here, see where we're at. Hydra HH, Canadian money. Your Canada bucks aren't useful. They're not accepted here. America's hat. Hey, Dr. Z, wondering what your thoughts are on the Novavax. I talked about it a little earlier. Moth cells infected with a moth baculovirus that contains the genetic code instructions to make spike protein. Those cell cultures make the spike protein. You purify it, so you have purified spike protein. You add a soap bark tree extract that acts as an immune stimulator. Mix it all together in a soup and inject it under the muscle, and that's how that one works. I think it seems highly effective. Doesn't look like it has a lot of unpleasant effects, but I haven't seen the source data because it's not come out, it's not been released, not been FDA reviewed, all that. But if you're waiting for that, I'm not sure I understand that, really. And you can help me understand it. It might be because you don't trust mRNA technology, and that's a slightly older technology, right? That Novavax is using. But honestly, I don't know. I was jazzed to get the mRNA, man. I'm like, this sounds awesome. Let's do it. And it's been great. I mean, I'm not dead. I only have 4 penises now, before I had 2. So, in classroom, mandatory CO2 meters instead of face masks, like in Belgium. What do you think? Mandatory CO2 meters. So why would you do that? You think carbon dioxide levels are rising? You mean CO meters, like carbon monoxide? I don't know. Help me understand that one. So true about discriminating mandates, Dr. Z, Kristen. They are discriminatory. Racially discriminatory, socioeconomically discriminatory, right? I don't know. I don't like it. Lay Greco, love your messages and keep refreshing and your refreshing delivery. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Lee. Ball boys. Hey, what up, ball boys? Slightly off topic. What's the future of vaccine tech? Can we get mRNA mixes, other vehicles for delivery, self-spreading vaccines? Yes. This is going to be a renaissance of technology. I really think so. So the thing is, don't expect the trials to go very fast because there's going to be hard recruit people, post-COVID. Everyone's exhausted, but hopefully we can. Oh, man. Magnum Imus. Dr. Z, I'm in a bad trip. Can you say something encouraging about the future before I go to bed? Okay, so are you really tripping right now? Because if so, I've been there in college. I've been there. It's scary. Remember this. It goes away. It feels like it's permanent. It goes away, and you'll feel way better in just a little bit. Remember this, my brother or sister. Everything is one beautiful, loving presence. That's all we are. You, me, the anti-vaxxers, the pro-vaxxers, Fauci, Robert Malone, we're all avatars of one thing. And that thing is just unlimited, endless, undying love. So what could be wrong there? There's nothing wrong. Nothing can ever be wrong. The earth could go poof and nothing would be wrong. It would be just fine. So there you have it. I miss the days of bad trips. Ken Mobile, thank you so much for the support. Mary S., are they tracking which vaccine folks received when they get breakthrough COVID? Yes, I believe they have that. They're getting that data, but not as good as we would like. The U.S. is bad at collecting data. It's really a shame. Amy Patterson, is long-term data a concern? The polio vaccine took a few years before the negative effects were discovered. Vaccine hesitant here. So I'm not sure that's true, Amy. As Paul Offit said, every effect that we've had that are negative from vaccines, all the existing vaccines, were seen within the first 2 months of vaccine administration. So polio vaccine effects, the main negative effect that was seen was, since it was a live virus, very rarely it will cause polio, because maybe you'd have a batch where there was one virus that wasn't attenuated, right? And so I don't think that's true. So you can rest assured that at least with polio, that's not the case. The presumption with the mRNA stuff is the same thing. Remember, these are short-lived effects. No matter what you read online from these kind of kooky docs that come on and they're like, oh, this is going to accumulate in your gonads. It's like when you inject pure spike protein into the blood of mice and then you measure their gonads, sure, you're going to find it. Come on. So yeah, I don't think I'm not worried about it. Now, does that mean it's impossible? Nothing's impossible. But I think if you're looking at risk and benefit, we know the risks of COVID are shitty for most people. Now, most people meaning you're rolling the dice, right? Most people are going to do fine, but the ones that don't do really badly. If you look at vaccine, the risks are so small that I think the benefits vastly outweigh the risks when it comes to what we're talking about here, which is preventing COVID or preventing severe disease. Lucretia says, my dad watched me almost die from ARDS, H1N1 in 2009. Oh, wow. And I still can't convince him to get a COVID vaccine. It tells you something, right? I had young people die of H1N1 when I was a hospitalist taking care of swine flu back in those days, man. It was horrible. ARDS, the whole thing, just like what we see in COVID. Just not as, the numbers were, didn't have as high of an infection fatality rate, maybe. All right, look, I got to go. You know why? It's been almost an hour. We started at 4:20. Hits from the bong. God, I miss Cypress Hill. Remember those guys? Came to get high. To wrap it up, I just got to say this. Like, we really need to just have, did everything freeze? We really just need to have, I'm getting all these warnings on my thing, like loving, rational discourse around this stuff. Like, yeah, sure, every now and again I'll make some jokes at, say, Joe Rogan's expense, because Joe Rogan's talking about injecting vitamins and NAD and ivermectin and taking a Z-Pack for a virus and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, well, it's punching up to make fun of Joe Rogan because he's going to survive just fine COVID, and he has. And he's a role model for many, 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 many people, believe it or not. So it's kind of my duty to do a little short and go, hey, let's poke a little fun at this, right? I still love Joe. I love what he does most of the time. Some of the stuff I disagree with. It's just like people disagree with me. But you got to do your thing. He's authentically Joe, man. He's never going to lie to you about what he thinks. So that's a beautiful thing. All right. That being said, we're going to do that. Until next time, I love you guys.